The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, my name is Brittany Kabinski, and I just want to welcome everyone. It is now 1 p.m., so we will begin our presentation shortly. Today, on September 23rd, we will have our presentation on natural gas extraction planning implications given by Peter Wulfhorst, Neal, Fogle, and Kurt Hausammann. For help during today's webcast, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box found in the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen or call 1-800-263-6317. For content questions, please feel free to type those in the questions box, and we will be able to answer those at the end of the presentation during the question and answer session. Here's a list of the sponsoring chapters, divisions, and universities. I would like to thank all of the participating chapters, divisions, and universities for making these webcasts possible, and also the Pennsylvania chapter for hosting this webinar today. As you can see, we have quite a few webinars coming up in the next few months. To register for these upcoming webcasts, please visit www.utah-apa.org/webcasts and register for your webinar of choice. You can now follow us on Twitter at Planning Webcast to receive up-to-date information on the Planning Webcast series sponsored by chapters, divisions, and universities. To log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, please go to www.planning.org/CM, select today's date, Friday, September 23rd, and then select today's webcast, Natural Gas Extraction Planning Implications. This webcast is available for 1.5 CM credits. We are recording today's webcast, and it will be available along with a 6-slide per page PDF of the presentation at www.utah-apa.org/webcast-archive. At this time, I would like to introduce our speakers for today. So Peter Wulfhorst has a bachelor's degree from Penn State University in Environmental Sciences and a master's in Environmental Planning. Since 1989, he has been employed with Penn State Cooperative Extension, where he is currently an Economic and Community Development Extension educator in Pike County. In this position, Mr. Wulfhorst provides non-formal education program on local government, community planning, water resources, and leadership. He has also conducted educational programs on Marcellus Shale, water issues, community development issues, and planning for impacts of Marcellus Shale activity. Prior to his employment with Cooperative Extension, he served as a county planner for Pike County. Mr. Wulfhorst is also a past president of the Twin Walker Creeks Watershed Conservancy and chairman of the Shohola Township Planning Commission. Neal Fogle has a bachelor's from Shippensburg University in Geoenvironmental Studies and a master's in Community and Economic Development from Penn State University. He is currently an Economic and Community Development educator with Penn State Extension, a position he has held for 10 years. Prior to his work with Extension, he was the Columbia County, Pennsylvania Planning Director for 13 years, after serving as a land use planner for 2 years. In his work with Extension, he conducts non-formal educational programs on community planning, Marcellus Shale development, organizational strategic planning, local government, and grant writing. Mr. Fogle is a certified instructor with the Pennsylvania Municipal Planning Education Institute and has served on the Pennsylvania Planning Association's Central Section Board, Northeast Extension Land Use Network, and the Penn State Environmental and Natural Resources Institute Advisory Committee. He has co-authored the publications Questions Citizens and Local Leaders Should Be Asking, Marcellus Shale Fact Sheet, Marcellus Shale, What Local Government Officials Need to Know, and Developing Effective Citizen Engagement, a How-To Guide for Community Leaders. Kurt Hausammann graduated from Penn State with a bachelor's in Administration of Justice and Marywood University with a master's of Public Administration. He has over 30 years of experience in local government, having worked in local and county government as a casework supervisor, borough manager, zoning officer, and subdivision administrator, and deputy director of the Lycoming County Department of Planning and Community Development. He was appointed to Director of Planning and Community Development with Lycoming County in 2007. Mr. Hausammann is a member of the Lycoming County Community Gas Exploration Task Force and chairman of the Planning Director's Gas Committee. Lycoming County is experiencing a surge in the number of gas wells drilled per year and anticipates that 1,000 new wells will be completed by the spring of 2012. Let's welcome Peter Wulfhorst, who will be our first presenter for today.
Thank you, Brittany. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to address the issues of natural gas development in my remarks. One of some of the things that communities need to be made aware of when it comes to this activity. This slide shows the major shale gas plays throughout the lower 48 states. In the upper right, you can see the Marcellus Shale, which covers parts of 5 states. And in the lower left is Pennsylvania, showing that it encompasses or overlies 52 of our 67 counties. When it comes to natural gas plays here in the lower 48, you can see in the middle the Marcellus Shale, which in this graph shows the potential for recoverable gas out of that formation. Now recently there's been some articles. USGS has estimated that about 84 trillion cubic feet of natural gas is technically can be obtained from the Marcellus Shale, so it is a big part of these natural gas plays, and so it is potentially big here for Pennsylvania and throughout the country. The fresh water that is used for drilling Marcellus Shale and other natural gas plays require lots of water, typically 3 to 4, sometimes more million gallons per well. Here in Pennsylvania, the fresh water that is used, if there is an access to that water needed, that's under the control of the landowner, so they would need, the gas companies would need permission to get to the water, to access that water. However, to allocate that water for the use of hydraulic fracturing is under the state control, either through Department of Environmental Protection, as well as 2 river basin commissions that cover about 2/3 of the Commonwealth. These water withdrawals that are currently being used by gas companies here in Pennsylvania for natural gas extraction are obtained through purchasing water from local municipal water companies. I know in Bellefonte and Center County there's a big spring and they are selling some of their water to the gas companies. Other withdrawals occur through large rivers and impoundments. In the past, they were using some small streams, and there were some issues with some parts of the state where these streams, the flow conditions didn't allow them to obtain that water during certain seasons. Some might be using groundwater. The newest one that we're seeing is wastewater, where old abandoned mine drainage and mixing some of the frac fluid with the fresh water to reuse for fracking additional wells. Some of the biggest concerns we see here is in Western PA, where there is no river basin commission, and it's up to the DEP to provide the authority to withdraw the water. And because of that, we've seen some instances in that part of the state and other parts of the state where there's been illegal withdrawals, and so we have an issue, a concern with enforcement to make sure that the water has properly been permitted for extraction to use for the gas wells. We talk about waste fluid. That's one of the issues that are affecting local communities, not just in Pennsylvania but throughout the country. And there's 4 basic waste fluids. The first one is drilling fluids, which include fresh water and muds that they're using to drill through the rock to get to the Marcellus Shale. That also involves cuttings as they drill through these rock formations that they have to capture and take care of. The brine fluid, which is the fluid where the rock is located that contains the natural gas. It's very high in salts and heavy metals, and so that's going to then come to the surface. That needs to be taken care of. The flowback water, which is the water mixed with the chemicals that they're using in the fracking of the wells, and so some of those materials are quite toxic, and so when they come to the surface they have to take care of treating those. And then finally the production fluids, which are the fluids produced with the gas. You can see in this picture there is a tank, and so depending on the wetness or the dryness of the gas, there is some fluids generated in production of gas extraction. What can go wrong? These are just some bullets. This is a storage pit that they're storing the waste. If there's not enough freeboard and it tips over, it could be released to the environment. One of the issues we're seeing in Pennsylvania in the past has been inadequate well construction, which has led to methane migration to the groundwater. Spills, we've had examples of spills, diesel fuel spilling on the site. Now they're starting to have containment pads to prevent that. And then finally, the inadequate inspections and enforcement. This caught Pennsylvania by surprise at the state government. There wasn't really a lot of individuals out there. They've increased those inspectors, but there's been some instances where there hasn't been enough manpower in the field to make sure that the regulations are adhered to. Waste fluid collection and how it's transported. It's basically held in pits with acceptable plastic liners, usually double lined. There should be 2 feet of freeboard to prevent water from escaping or getting out into the environment. It's usually the waste is transported via tanks, tanker trucks, to waste facilities, which we'll talk about in a minute, or to other well pads in some cases where they're mixing that with fresh water and taking some of the materials out of that can be reused for fresh fracking water. In Pennsylvania, which might be different somewhat throughout the rest of the country, our options of wastewater have basically been, in the beginning, trying to mix it with conventional municipal wastewater systems. However, the salts do not get removed, and so we've had instances where we've had high total dissolved solids being dumped into the surface water, and some of those surface waters have been used for intakes for fresh water. For consumers, deep injection wells is limited in Pennsylvania, like some other parts of the country. We do have some sites that are being used, and there might be some additional sites in the future. Reuse recycling. The cost of treating this wastewater, it was about 12 to 25 cents per gallon compared to pennies per gallon for municipal wastewater treatment. So it is expensive, but they're trying to directly dilute some of it, take some of the materials out and reuse it, or they're diluting it with fresh water to reuse as fracking fluids for fracking of the wells. We are looking at advanced treatment here, and these are just some of the treatment options. New companies are coming involved in taking care of this wastewater, but as I mentioned, it's very much more expensive than conventional treatment, so there is a cost to it. One of the issues that we're seeing here in Pennsylvania, and there's been other research throughout the country, that these energy booms, based on an economic experience, that some of these post-energy boom communities, once the resource is extracted and the material's been taken out of the ground, what's left in the community is sometimes not much better off as it was before the energy boom. And so studies in West Virginia and Wyoming show that present and future impact of natural gas drilling is uncertain. We don't know here what's going to be happening to our communities. There was an initial boom, and we're seeing that right now in Pennsylvania, but we're concerned that once the resource is extracted, what's going to happen to our communities. And so some of these communities that have experienced this throughout the country, there's some key characteristics. One of them is lack of trust, leadership, the human capital to go beyond the energy boom. It's like putting your eggs in one basket, so it's recommended that there have some diversity in your economy, not relying on one type of economic engine. You want to make sure you can promote economic diversity, development. It's important that we keep the wealth generated by the Marcellus Shale here in Pennsylvania, that it's been used in the community. And so some communities have addressed that by investing in early child care, higher education, maybe taking some of that revenue that's generated and putting in a fund to be used for economic diversification in the future once this resource is extracted and completely gone. Here in Pennsylvania, we're starting to see some experiences that impacting local communities on an economic basis, and we have research taking place in the state, in these Marcellus Shale communities. One of the things that we have that research has shown that there is a higher state's tax collections. One of those is through sales tax, as we see increased workers moving into the state or people being employed from Pennsylvania in this industry, that they're out there spending their disposable income on things, and so the state's collecting additional sales tax. There is some benefit to the state also for this income tax, as well as communities that do collect and earn income tax, but however, some of these individuals that live in other communities and you can't, jurisdiction that they're located in can't tax those individuals if their domicile is in another part of the state. We're also seeing some higher state government costs, even though there's no estimate. That's probably because the state needed additional workers, was caught not having enough when this boom started here in Pennsylvania. There's also been many studies done recently by Penn State Extension revealing that gas drilling has had major impact on local government. Some governments local governments reporting higher costs than new revenues. About 18% through a recent study said their tax revenue had increased. 26% said their costs have increased, especially related to road maintenance. And you can see the changes we're seeing in our communities reflect that, where there's traffic and road impacts of this carrying both wastewater and the water to these well pads. The number of workers that are needed, they need a place to stay, and so in some cases we've seen landlords increasing the rent for these workers and it's negatively affecting individuals that don't have the income to meet those higher rent costs. We've seen social conflict in some of our communities. We have what we call haves and have-nots, neighbors not talking to each other in this industry, and then lots of uncertainty. People really don't know what the future holds. You know how long the gas industry will be here. It's in its infancy, but we expect it to be 15, 20, 30 years. Nobody knows at this point. State has seen some, in those counties that there is heavy gas activity, the state has seen increase in the sales tax collection. We know the last couple of years we've had a downturn in the economy, and so people don't have as much income to spend, and so they're not spending on items that maybe eating out as much at a restaurant, buying things from stores. But in those counties that have seen the largest number of wells, you can see on the graph on the far left that the sales tax of those counties of 150 wells or more has increased by 11%. So you can see economically it is positively impacting those areas where this activity is taking place. However, this can be a two-edged sword because, as I mentioned, there is a high cost of living. We're having more people moving into the community. Obviously, though, some employment's being good for those communities. But the rentals have increased due to housing demand. In some cases, when there's emergencies, that people need short-term housing. The local agencies that provide that for them don't have as much of a housing stock to select from. And the other issue is the non-gas industries. This picture of a facility shows that they only were able to retain one auto mechanic at this facility because the rest of them started working for the gas industries, and these are companies losing those employees. And so that person called in sick one day, and so that day there was nobody available to take care of any customers. And the other thing is commercial space has increased the price because of the gas company, and they're able to pay for those increased commercial spaces. And finally, the long-range competitiveness. One of the examples with that for these non-gas businesses is the tourism industry. It's in its infancy here in Pennsylvania, so we don't know what that impact's going to be, but there is some thought that if we see this activity increasing, that it's going to affect the ability of people wanting to visit those areas, the tourists, because they'll see things that maybe they don't want to see from these well pads and these rigs and so forth. But it's too early to tell whether that's going to occur, but that's a possibility. Other significant community issues for local government, I mentioned the roads, the highway safety. You can see a picture here of trucks traveling these highways. We've had accidents happen for these vehicles, the housing issue for the workers that are needed, water and sewage with the increased number of people moving in, that infrastructure, the police. Some communities have had to increase their police to deal with possible issues of rowdy behavior and other criminal issues by the increased workers. Emergency services, we'll show you that in a minute, what's happened in some communities. The schools, we've seen some increase in schools that basically were declining or flat. And then the issue of human resources for local government, the increased number of people needed, especially at county government and the assessment offices where these deeds are being recorded. Significant community issues, I do have a slide up there looking at enrollment in some of the school districts in the areas that are experiencing Marcellus Shale. So we've had population change, new schools increase with the families moving in, housing needs. Some of the industry have built specific housing for their workers. The population composition, diversity, outsiders moving in from other parts of the country, and so there's conflicts with that. Child care implications, we have some studies taking place by researchers at Penn State looking at the effect of Marcellus Shale development on families with children. If both wage earners are working, is there implications then for child care, the intergenerational relationships happening between family members, family well-being, health, substance abuse, that's an issue also with people work long hours, have time off, and so they have a lot of money. Sometimes they're single men, and so we see that happening in Pennsylvania. As I mentioned, the truck traffic to carry the waste and also the water to these sites is quite large, and these are some numbers that came from some studies previously done in the different phases of construction for Marcellus and other natural gas plays. This is in Bradford County where we're seeing activity, and you can see the averages for traffic on Route 6 and State Route 14 in different sections of Bradford County, how the averages have increased dramatically. And I personally experienced this out in Towanda where the backup was over a mile getting into the borough on Route 6, and it was comprised a lot of natural gas vehicles. I mentioned emergency services. This is information for 4 counties that are experiencing Marcellus Shale activity, and you can see in Tioga, the far right one is only the first 6 months, but the graphs show you that the emergency service calls, the 911 calls, have increased. That's put a strain on local emergency providers as well as the county that has to answer those calls. So that's been an impact in Pennsylvania. One of the counties is addressing emergency service issues by developing 911 addressing, doing awareness training to emergency responders, and then they've identified specialized emergency response training equipment needed to respond to such incidents. So many of our county emergency management agencies are trying to keep on track of the issue of dealing with emergencies that occur at these gas pads that affect the local responders, and providing them the training and getting the materials posted on these sites so emergency responders know what they're addressing when they have to arrive at the site. Finally, natural resource issues. We're having state land, and Pennsylvania means Penn's Woods, so we have a lot of woods, and so we're concerned that what's going to happen might happen to the scarlet tanager in the upper right, of habitat fragmentation, opening up patches of the forest and providing disturbance. You can see a wall pad located within a forest, and what that might mean to the, especially the animals that need large intact tracts of forest, the spread of invasive species, both plant and animals. Other issues that we haven't experienced too much here in Pennsylvania, but other parts of the country, are air quality, like benzene levels by these well pads have increased, possibly in some parts of the country. The negative effects on recreation aesthetics. We still have a big hunting component and tourism component in parts of Pennsylvania where this activity is occurring. And what will that do if we're seeing an increase of these well pads? Is it going to negatively affect those that travel for the recreational opportunities? Also, pipelines. I don't personally live in an area of Pennsylvania that's experiencing well pads, but about a mile from my house, we've had a pipeline that they've added a second pipeline to, so they've cleared the area, and we're having impacts on erosion issues with regard to runoff. And so you can see on this map what's happening in addition to the gathering lines, but the major transmission lines are increasing, putting additional capacity in the pipeline. And these pipelines that are being placed in Pennsylvania can potentially act as a barrier to dispersal for some of our native species, like the salamander that travels distances to breeding grounds, and it can act as an avenue for invasion of both plants and animals, such as this cowbird, species such as skunks, raccoons, invasive plants then showing up on these pipelines and then getting out into other parts of the state. To reduce these pipeline impacts, there's some bullets there that we've shared with people in Pennsylvania through a previous Marcellus Shale webinar, looking at to locate. This is more geared towards the gathering lines. Locate them in or along existing right-of-ways, to go from the well pads to the main transmission lines using existing boundary areas instead of across farm fields through forest. Maintenance of the right-of-way of these pipelines to reduce the spread of invasive weeds like Japanese stiltgrass and others that we're seeing out here in Pennsylvania. And then the big question, can our communities, operators of these pipelines work together to better plan pipeline development instead of having a spider web of pipelines throughout the community? And I know Kurt might address some of that in his presentation. The landowner role and needs for these pipelines, it's great to get educated, making sure that for these gathering lines, these landowners have the right-of-way and surface use agreements that protect their interest for their property. This requires a range of knowledge and negotiating skills. Some are better than others. We do have fact sheets at the Penn State Extension that talk about pipeline easement considerations and financial considerations. As always, it's important that individuals get proper legal counsel in addressing these pipeline agreements. That is my contact information. That'll also be shown on the last slide by Kurt. So now I'm going to turn it over to Neal.
Okay, thanks, Peter. I'm going to cover some of the processes through the planning steps from the beginning towards when you get to activity and even later on, and talk about a lot of other issues as well. I've noticed in Pennsylvania that a lot of municipal officials say, really, do we need to, why bother? Is there really limited things that we could do? Or what's going to happen is going to happen, will that impact the economic benefits if we actually go through planning and look at kind of controlling some things? But there certainly are some planning steps that can be taken and can make a difference. Really, by having an idea what's heading your way, you can prepare accordingly, and you want to plan ahead instead of react after the fact. You want to anticipate the impacts, both the positive and the negative, and you want to avoid or minimize the potential negative impacts and attract or maximize the positives. Some of the real advantages of planning are that it helps promote your community as a good place to do business, and at the same time provide documented expectations, such as the importance of certain scenic vistas or community special events. Certainly, the more informed you are about an issue, the easier it is to make decisions about it. Planning helps you anticipate a wide range of community needs, including employment, training, and services. Here's an example. The business on the left is looking for certified drivers, and on the right is showing a business that is saying, come here or ask us how we can help you become a certified driver. In order to adequately plan for community impacts, you should become informed and educated so you know what you're dealing with. Assess your ability to plan or take action. This is where you find out what authority you actually do have, what tools are available, and if you know how to use them. You should identify stakeholders. Also establish good communication and relationships. This is very important in natural gas development. It actually comes up a lot when you interview or talk to different folks involved in the natural gas process, as well as community leaders. Very, very important. I'll touch on a little bit later as well. And finally, take the appropriate actions. If you do the previous steps well, your decisions will be more well-founded, and you'll you know what your decision or conclusion is based upon. You'll know who it affects and how it affects them. And certainly all these tasks are interrelated. For example, if you become educated on the issue but don't take appropriate action, you really have no implementation for it. If you identify the people you should be talking to but never contact them or don't speak up to them because of an adversarial relationship, you won't be effective in coordination and collaboration. It's important to know who the regulatory authorities are so that you know what types of items are being regulated, as well as who to contact if there's an issue under that particular entity's jurisdiction. Peter had touched on these, so I won't deal with these much, but certainly one in Pennsylvania at least is the Department of Environmental Protection. They permit well siting, environmental controls, inspections. So for planners or officials in other states, you certainly want to see who has the authority to do that in your particular jurisdiction. Peter also mentioned the Interstate River Basin Commissions, and we do have 2 in Pennsylvania, and that's another item that in other areas you would want to see who has jurisdiction over the water withdrawal. And another one is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and they regulate interstate natural gas transport as well as pipeline storage and liquefied natural gas facility construction. Some of the additional things to know, certainly the potential impacts. These can really be a wide range. Things such as the water issues, forest fragmentation, the increased employment opportunities, but competition for the workforces of existing local businesses, cultural differences that's popping up in a number of areas, people from other parts of the country moving in that have a different cultural background than what's been in the area. Land use changes, and many of these you may not be familiar with if natural gas development is new to your area. There's also the emergency services needs, as well as the strains on the roads, sewer and water service, and school facilities and staff. Planning for natural gas impacts includes obtaining applicable information, and this can't be done in isolation. You need to be able to readily contact people or organizations that can provide you with the information you need. You should have contact information for and be willing to contact entities such as the gas industry representatives to get information from and give information to for issues such as road needs and other impacts. Regulatory agency personnel to ask questions as they arise and to get clarification on issues. Identified stakeholders to share information, concerns, and express needs, as well as other educational or support entities such as cooperative extension or organizational associations that you belong to. This is to expand a little bit upon some of the things Peter talked about. This shows the different stages of boom towns, and I really do think this is a really important slide because it helps you think about what's coming or potentially coming down the road, and helps you think about when do we need to look at certain issues or who do we have to have involved at these different stages. It also helps citizens as well as planners look for balance and reality checks from the early stages on. It helps you anticipate when conflict and opposition may come and show that you want those on each side of the issue involved from the very beginning. So for the enthusiasm level, those promoting economic benefits may get more of a public stage than those concerned over environmental issues. So if you're at the very early stages, you want to make sure you have a voice from all sides. At the uncertainty level, many people still are probably sorting out their stance on related issues, and that can impact how easy or hard it is to plan. At near panic, some residents and stakeholders may express concern that certain impacts weren't planned for, or forewarn that this is only the beginning of future change. And as planners, you want to move the adaptation stage up as early as possible to have things in place to deal with these issues. As with any activity that will impact a community, there will be varying opinions about what steps leaders should take in the best interest of the citizens. Some are going to be concerned and want the activity locally regulated. Others will fear that controls will jeopardize the benefits to stakeholders such as leaseholders and support businesses. But you really need to know what limitations are placed on you before attempting to plan or regulate, and these limitations could be legislative or judicial. You don't want to put in a lot of time, effort, and money into plans only to have them become null and void or unimplementable. Based upon this knowledge, you should inventory your existing ordinances and planning documents and determine the need to upgrade them or create new ones. You should consider documenting what's important to your community and determine if it's impacted by the natural gas industry. And it's important to document, not only to discuss this. There's certainly could be a number of sources to help you do this this evaluation, such as comprehensive plans, mission and vision statements, annual reports, and the like. Also, it could be done through a needs assessment of community leaders or organizations. Once you assess community and organizational priorities, you then determine what authority you have over the issue. Issues can arise over which the local community has no direct regulatory authority, and for a lot of the things in Pennsylvania that is the case, that there are a lot of preemptions for what local municipalities can do. And if that is the case for you, then of course you have to look at other options, such as communicating with the individual organization that does have the authority, or negotiation with the applicable parties, or education on the issues for those involved. One of the things that is extremely important is the ability of landowners to lease or not to lease, or to, if there is a sensitive area or something very important to the community, maybe they want to have some type of wording in the lease that would maybe allow more of a buffer or a way to deal with that and protect it. To plan for the future, you want to have some of an idea of what the future holds. This is really no different than if a developer is developing a tract of land in your community for housing. You want to get that background data. You want to know what's ahead. You want to look at, in the case of a development, how many lots, what the road system is going to be like, what types of homes would be built, what types of utilities. Now, certainly planning for natural gas is different than planning for housing development, but again, the point is you need to get that data there and that information there to base your decisions on. This includes, the slide includes some examples of some of the data needs. You want to look at things such as the volume rate and extent of drilling activity. That'll give you an idea what may be coming down the road. An example here is the information from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. They, in the case of Pennsylvania, provide permit and rig activity as well as well locations, and they also provide a service that if you sign up for it, they will actually email you or provide information on upcoming permits when they're put into the system. And certainly for other states, you'd want to look if such a system exists as well to help you get some of your data needs. Other things, the knowledge of the gas industry representatives can certainly be very helpful as far as future activity or industry needs and technology. You want to, again, establish a line of communication with them. Also, just a review of past activity and discussions with adjoining communities. To see what not only is happening in your immediate area but around you can help you kind of get an idea for what they've gone through or haven't gone through yet, as well as for the region what the future may hold. There's also a useful website that's shown on here, the Baker Hughes Rig Count website. It lets you customize your search for past and current rig activity. And also certainly keep out an eye open for studies from educational or academic institutions as well as other associations. An example in Pennsylvania, The Marcellus Shale Educational Training Center did a workforce needs assessment that was available for community leaders as well as the public. For those in the planning profession, a lot of times planning seems like, what if, or the potential scenarios. And if you are beginning to experience or very soon may experience natural gas development, it kind of really turns into real-world planning or real-world situations. It's not, if it comes, it's here, and now how do we deal with it? So comprehensive plan is a very important component. I know Kurt's going to talk about this, so I'll just touch on it. Some of the things that it will do is set some standards for the community that you want to strive for. It would involve obtaining and analyzing data, setting goals, setting priorities, receiving input. And having a comprehensive plan give you some baseline data on what your community is like now, and from that you can document how it actually is changing. A lot of components of a comprehensive plan really do relate to natural gas development. For example, future community development. This may address the areas of your community you want developed in certain time frames, and that can change based on the influx of natural gas development. Same for a land use component. How's that going to fit into the character of your community? Need to think about, there very well may be accelerated development that's resulting from natural gas development, and what type of conflicting land uses may you have to deal with issues such as compressor stations. Housing needs certainly can change, particularly a lot of areas are experiencing the need for temporary housing, which wasn't an issue before. Transportation is one of the really big items in natural gas development and comprehensive planning, and it's important to know what your road systems are there now, what they're designed for, and how to deal with some of the impacts, maybe how to better link the transportation systems. Community facilities also can be impacted, and that can be part of your comprehensive plan. And a study or analysis of natural and historic resources that could help with providing information for regulators for consideration, as well as enhanced collaborative efforts with stakeholders. Just touch on this as far as ordinances. Again, Kurt will give good examples of his situation, but just to let you know that certainly zoning ordinances and subdivision land development ordinances are out there. There are a lot of limitations in Pennsylvania as far as what Pennsylvania planners can do, but in your individual state, you have to look and see what components can be applied to direct development of natural gas, as well as the offshoot or spin-off development, and which is more so can be addressed in Pennsylvania. At least in Pennsylvania, there's also an option for official map, which basically lays aside areas for future right-of-way. This could be especially important for the cumulative impact of traffic from natural gas. As with any type of regulatory authority, particularly again when there's preemptions, you have to make sure you deal with your solicitor for those. For roads, they are impacted due to the volume of truck traffic. This is a pretty good picture of a pretty rural area. It shows you what condition this particular road is in. In Pennsylvania, at least, the available options are posting and bonding of the roads. This includes posting the road itself. You have to have an excess maintenance agreement. You have to require permits, and there's road inspections and monitoring, and then securing a bond. Some municipalities, as opposed to going that route, have just been having a gas industry maintenance agreement with the companies. They sign off on that. That deals more with the companies saying, we agree to fix up the roads, as opposed to the posting and bonding, where there's a set specific amount put aside. And some municipalities are just going on verbal assurances as well. Other plans In addition to the things I've talked about that could be applicable, certainly capital improvement plans, which could help in the future for budgeting for long-term major projects that could be impacted by natural gas development. Open space and recreational plans, things such as site development and clearing for gathering collector lines, could be proposed in a scenic area or within hiking trails. Or some municipalities actually have leased out land in those areas, and then more funds may be available to purchase new lands or upgrade facilities. Compressor stations, again, could be an issue if it's in an area that is deemed more for passive recreation. There may have to be something done to see if something could make sure that there's reduced noise levels. And other plans certainly can be applicable, economic development, workforce and education, as well as the school district plans, and they all really should be some coordination for those that are developing those. Something you really should think about is at the local level, and particularly, who's going to be responsible to keep track of what's going on or to keep up with natural gas development. Most likely, the lifespan of the development is going to exceed that of any particular person in office. So, some of the things to think about is to delegate, like a certain elected official, as opposed to a person, to say, the chair, that's their responsibility when they come into office to keep up or to be the main overseer of natural gas issues in our community. Certainly could be delegated to the Municipal Planning Commission. A lot of areas are different as far as how active the planning commissions are. I know in Pennsylvania, some very rural areas, the planning commissions only meet when there's a subdivision proposed, and sometimes that's not very often. But this would give some actual planning work for the local commission to do. Another option, at least in Pennsylvania, is an environmental advisory committee, or a task force could be formed as well. Need to identify the stakeholders. This is really important for a number of things, for the communication, for coordination, for collaboration. It's much more effective to work together with others that are looking for some of the same things you are. It expands your knowledge base, allows for direct delivery or receipt of education on pertinent issues, and it lets you know what resources may be available for certain tasks. Just a summary here of who some of the stakeholders may be, and this is by no means a complete list and could be different for what particular area you're in. But stakeholders range from the landowners to natural gas related businesses and subcontractors, government officials, and conservancy and land trusts and environmental groups. I mentioned before, you do need to have good communications and relationships. Some of the things you want to take the time to determine and then communicate as a municipality or community as a whole. What is it you want out of a natural gas development? What do you want your community to look like? And what is most important to your community? Are there positive aspects about the community that you're not willing to give up, or that you're willing to give up on a temporary basis? And are there negative aspects about your community that could use some change, particularly the economic situation? In order to get the answer to some of these questions, certainly a review of the comprehensive plan could help. Other agency plans, as well as related documents, or you could hold also input from the public or involve stakeholders. And then have you documented the answers to these questions, and then have you shared that, or you should share it with some of the key players, such as the gas industry itself, regulators, legislators, economic development organizations. You may have to negotiate these issues, but you won't know where you stand unless you communicate. There are other means by which communities can address the ability to deal with the impacts of natural gas development. One is community visioning, where you look at the community prioritize needs and develop some actions to meet those needs. This has been done in Tioga County in Pennsylvania. They went through a program called Charting the Future of Our Community. and they did have stakeholders involved. They had multiple meetings, and came up with a plan for what was important to them, and how could that be achieved, and try to establish that relationship and communication. Also, there's a lot of challenges for a lot of organizations when there's a lot of change, and how effective are they? And another means is for an organizational strategic plan to, if an organization already has one, to either upgrade it, to become more efficient, or to set some new goals. And that is a way of developing an action plan to help meet the goals, including the new challenges that they face. So to summarize, taking action is a result of doing all of the tasks that I talked about that can lead to action steps. By becoming informed and educated, you set the basis upon which you can evaluate the eventual courses of action you can and should take. By assessing your ability to plan or take action, you conducted an organizational assessment and evaluated available tools by which action can be initiated. By identifying stakeholders, you decided to not plan or eventually act in a vacuum and consider the impact on others. And by establishing good communication and relationships, you helped increase the likelihood that the actions or positions you will take will be better universally understood and effective. And the planning process itself should result in thought out and appropriate actions. And of course, all these tasks are correlated. One kind of leads and relates to the other. There again is my contact information, and that will be available at the end of the presentation. And I will turn it over to Kurt.
Hi, Kurt. If you're speaking right now, I don't believe that we're hearing you. Make sure that you're not muted.
Okay. Good afternoon. This is Kurt Hausammann. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why zoning and planning is so important as related to the Marcellus Shale. You heard from Neal about the comprehensive plan and why that's important. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that, some of the legal applications of the comprehensive plan and how it relates to subdivision and zoning. I'm going to, in some detail, talk about subdivision and zoning ordinance as related to Marcellus, and I'm going to talk about the need for good planning and economic development for the future of in our case, Lycoming County. I'm having a little difficulty in my slide there. This is the location of Lycoming County. You can see, of course, where Pennsylvania is related to the United States, but Lycoming County is in the north-central part of the state of Pennsylvania, and it is very central to the Marcellus play. And because of that, Lycoming County is not only seeing a lot of drilling taking place in our county, but we are also seeing many support companies or locating in Lycoming County for the drilling industry. We first became aware of this. This is a relatively new event for us in Lycoming County. We became aware of it in the fall of 2007. A task force was created in early 2008. And one of the most important things that we did was several members of our county task force traveled to Fort Worth in July of 2008. and we went to see the Barnett play, and we met with company officials, we met with local government officials, we met with drilling companies, and it was just very informative, and it was really a crash course on what to expect in drilling shale gas, and that was really worthwhile. In September 2008, we began work on a zoning amendment. It was readily apparent to us that our zoning ordinance was not adequate to deal with the drilling industry and with gas extraction. One thing that's unique in Pennsylvania, Neal talked a little bit about this, was that we have a state oil and gas act. And the State Oil and Gas Act in Pennsylvania is preemptive. And what that means is there are many things that you are not allowed to regulate locally. And when I say locally, I mean either on the county, the borough, the township, or the city level within the state of Pennsylvania. Also determined is that the only way you can regulate things locally is through your zoning ordinance. You cannot have a standalone oil and gas ordinance that would apply. You must do it through zoning. Our task force meets with industry representatives, and we deal with issues as they come up, and that's been very helpful to us as a county. And our task force then, in turn, tries to provide community information to the community by our county website. We found that it's very important to keep the lines of communication open. As Neal said, you need to have good communication. You need to foster good relationships. This is not just with the community, of course, because the public needs to be very involved, but you also have to work closely with the companies. You need to get to know your company representatives. You need to get to know what companies are operating in your county and reach out to them. Talk about and see what difficulties they're encountering in the municipality. See what their plans are for your county or your township, and then work with them so that they can achieve their goals, but you can also achieve your goals as outlined in your comprehensive plan as a county or a municipality. We learned that reasonable regulation is necessary, and by that I'm talking about that you don't want to regulate to the extreme that would shut down the industry, because then you're not going to be able to recognize the vast economic development opportunities that the industry does bring to your community. We found that best management practices are important, and we have incorporated them in our county ordinance. And by best management practices, that is practices that you would like to see the industry do, but they don't rise to the level of a regulation or have a force of law behind them. You negotiate with the companies and their representatives and work out how you would like to see them do the developments. The comprehensive plan is very important because it guides the development for 15 to 20 years into the future for your municipality. And Lycoming County had just updated their comprehensive plan in 2006. As you may remember, I talked about we didn't realize about Marcellus coming to the area until 2007. And so because of that, we really did not directly address Marcellus Shale or shale gas extraction in our comprehensive plan. But there were three top goals that were identified by residents and citizens of Lycoming County in our comprehensive plan. And that goal number one was protect our quality of life. And because of that, you can't have a drill baby drill philosophy and protect your quality of life at the same time. You do have to have some reasonable and balanced regulations so that the gas industry can succeed, but so you can protect your quality of life at the same time. We are a very rural county and an agricultural county, and because of that, that was goal number two of our comp plan, was maintain rural and agricultural nature of the county. Number three, from our comp plan, we also found that our residents live here, move here, and stay here because of the small town community atmosphere that we have in Lycoming County. So all land use regulation is based in Pennsylvania on the comprehensive plan. So it's very important because your zoning amendments and your zoning ordinance must be consistent with the comprehensive plan that you have in place. And if you remember a little bit earlier, I said that in Pennsylvania you can only regulate the gas industry locally through the zoning ordinance. So your comprehensive plan, your zoning ordinance are extremely important if you're to have any local control in Pennsylvania over the gas industry. You need to have an orderly process when you're working on your comprehensive plan, and the most important part to the comprehensive plan, it has to be a very public process. You need to have your citizens involved, and and you need to set up stakeholder groups, have a lot of public meetings, and the more involvement you can get from the public, the better your comprehensive plan will be, and the more value it will be to you in the future. The subdivision and land development in Pennsylvania also it does apply to the oil and gas industry. It applies on portions of land, a parcel that are being leased. Land development approval is also needed for compression and processing stations that are built in accordance with the gas industry or as supplemental development. In Lycoming County, we are one of the few counties in the state that has a county subdivision and land development ordinance, and we're one of a very small few counties in Pennsylvania that have a county zoning ordinance. And so the county ordinances only apply, however, to municipalities that do not have their own subdivision and their own zoning ordinances. In Pennsylvania, the lowest level of municipal government has the most control over zoning and subdivision. They decide if they're going to have their own ordinances, and they decide what goes into those ordinances at that level. And the county only comes into play if a municipality determines that they are not going to have their own subdivision and land development ordinances. Subdivision and land development does apply. It applies now to the industry. This is a map of Lycoming County, and in yellow you see the municipalities that are under the county zoning ordinance or county jurisdiction for subdivision and land development. It's approximately half of the municipalities. This is a map of county zoning ordinance jurisdiction. The municipalities that are on the map in green, there are 17, are the ones that do not have their own zoning ordinances, but in which the county zoning ordinance applies, and this is a true partnership with our municipalities. This is a map of the zoning districts in Lycoming County under the county zoning ordinances, and those districts are in the different colors. You can see that the northern third of our county is very much a resource protection district and located in green. This is also one of the largest areas where drilling is occurring in Lycoming County, is in the northern third and also in the eastern end of the county. This map represents in blue all of the leased parcels for oil and gas drilling in Lycoming County. And I think this map clearly represents that about 2/3 of our county has been leased for oil and gas extraction. In Pennsylvania, local regulation of oil and gas is through zoning, as I talked about, and to some extent through subdivision and land development. This land use can be regulated on a local basis. Your zoning does have to be consistent with your comprehensive plan, and the basis for all zoning in Pennsylvania is health, safety, and welfare. The regulations should be reasonable. I already talked about the State Oil and Gas Act. County Zoning Ordinance Amendment for Oil and Gas in Lycoming County was adopted in March 2011. One of the things I want to talk about is that we worked with, it was a public process for our coming up with and preparing our zoning amendment for oil and gas, and we worked with the industry. We had industry representatives of the 5 main companies that are working in Lycoming County. Their attorneys were at the table, and we did work with them. We did not prepare the ordinance amendment in a vacuum, and that has paid dividends for us because the ordinance has not been challenged by the oil and gas industry. We have received compliance with the ordinance from the companies that are working in Lycoming County, and it has been, overall, it has been a very smooth process. One of the things to note for Pennsylvania is that your ability is to regulate typical land use characteristics. You cannot do things in your zoning ordinance that you do not, for the oil and gas industry, that you do not regulate for other industries and other land uses in your county or jurisdiction. For example, the things that you can regulate are setbacks, buffering, screening, noise, glare, dust, odor, typical kind of things that you can regulate through a zoning ordinance. And also you can regulate where a particular land use is allowed to be located within your municipality, of course. Best management practices we feel should be included in the ordinance. For example, one of the ones that we worked on with the industry was that sole access to a drilling site should not be taken through a residential street unless there's no other means of access to the drilling site. And that basically is a health, safety, and welfare type of issue that we try to regulate. Again, I can't stress how important it is to include the industry when you're working on a zoning ordinance or a zoning ordinance amendment. The need for good planning. Because you can only regulate the oil and gas industry on a local level in Pennsylvania through zoning and subdivision and land development, planning is more important than ever. Your comprehensive plan is very important because that serves as the basis for all of your zoning, and your zoning needs to be consistent with it. So it needs to be very detailed, and it has to be forward-thinking, and you need to allow for all uses in Pennsylvania. That's one of the other things in Pennsylvania under zoning laws. You need to provide for all uses within your ordinance jurisdiction. There's 151 new wells drilled in Lycoming County in 2011. So it's something you have to prepare for and be ready for. Under our county ordinance, we do not permit drilling in 2 zoning districts, and they are more residential type of districts and are denser type of districts under the county zoning. It's important to note that our county zoning ordinance does by and large use mixed-use zoning districts. This is a map that shows the well sites that have taken place just as of August 2011. You can see it's concentrated in the upper third of the county, or almost upper half, and also out in the eastern end of the county. This in and of itself has caused transportation issues. We have heavy traffic on roadways that have never been used that heavily before. In Lycoming County, there is a very nice rural and recreation valley called the Pine Creek Valley, and the character of the valley has been greatly changed because of the number of trucks that are on the roadway. For example, the overall traffic on Route 44, which is the route that leads up through the Pine Creek Valley, has increased by 150% in the last 2 years. However, the truck traffic on that same route through the valley has increased by over 300%. Economic development, again, we're trying to strike a balance to protect our quality of life, maintain our rural nature, but at the same time we are trying to provide for the growth of the industry because there are very many economic development opportunities and revitalization opportunities for your cities and your boroughs and your developed areas that come because of the gas industry. So we're trying to do both. Again, it's balance, and that's a word I use quite a bit when I'm talking about the gas industry. We are trying to achieve a balance. At our core community, we have 1 city in our county, and our core community of Williamsport, which is the home of Little League Baseball. You may have heard of it because of that. But Williamsport, Pennsylvania is really seeing a revitalization like it has not seen for many years. And a lot of work was done to prepare through our lead partners organization and other community organizations for that revitalization. So we were somewhat prepared for what is taking place, but I wouldn't say we were completely prepared or completely ready. Brownfields development. I can't stress how important brownfield development is to dealing with the industry and finding homes for their supplemental development that comes as a result of the industry. So we are definitely using we have a brownfields program that's been in effect for about 8 years, and we are revitalizing many of our brownfields as a result of the supplemental development that's coming because of the gas industry. This is my contact information and also Neal's and Peter's, and I'll leave that slide up, and at this time I'll turn it back.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kurt. We got a couple questions in from some of the attendees, and I'm just going to go ahead and give you the first one, and any of the three of you are welcome to just jump in. What are some specific examples of issues that may void a land use plan or land use regulation?
Right. Well, as far as Pennsylvania, one of the things that would void it would certainly be going against the Oil and Gas Act, which basically says that you can't regulate the same types of things that particular state law does. So, and in some of the court cases, that's what was found to happen, where they ruled that the local municipality was trying to regulate the same things that the state was given the authority to. So that was from a from a legal side of things that would have or that did nullify that particular regulation.
Okay, great. Well, our next question is, are there major differences in land use or community impacts between natural gas extraction and oil drilling or mining in other areas of the country?
This is Kurt. I don't believe so. I believe that we're seeing a lot of the same impacts here. In Pennsylvania, previously we had seen impacts from the coal industry, and some people are comparing the oil and gas extraction to similar impacts that we've seen from the coal industry. But I don't think it's different than what people are seeing in other parts of the country. Except that one of the big things that we have is, in Lycoming County, we have over 2,200 miles of streams and waterways, and we are very concerned about the impacts that the industry will have on our scenic rivers and on our high-value watersheds and streams.
Yeah, this is Neal. I think there's a lot of similarities too, but there certainly are differences as well. Just within Pennsylvania, out in the western part of the state, had a lot of shallow gas wells. So, my understanding is they are used to a lot of the impacts, but things are different with Marcellus too. Since it's a deeper well, there's a lot more truck traffic. Different amounts of land disturbed for the activity and whatnot. So. I do think I agree there's a lot of similarities. However, you always have to remember there's going to be some differences out there as well that as a local official or local planner you need to be aware of.
Okay, our next question is, do you know of communities or counties that have programs to encourage or regulate well pad sitting in order to avoid environmentally sensitive areas, floodplains, steep slopes, core forests?
Yes, this is Kurt. It's very common for the people that do have the zoning ordinances in place that they prohibit gas drilling within the floodplains. In Lycoming County, we prohibit the drilling in the floodway sections of the floodplain. However, in the flood fringe section, it technically is permitted if the industry can show to us or prove to us that there's no other way they can extract the gas. That has not happened to this point. Lycoming County has issued no permits for any drilling within any flood plain areas, any regulatory floodplain areas. Because with the horizontal drilling, in most cases, the industry can set up outside of the floodplain and horizontal drill under the floodplain and still extract the gas. And that's something that people need to realize is there's a difference between prohibiting a well pad in a certain area, such as a floodplain, and prohibiting the extraction of the resource from that same area.
Okay, well, our next question is how many acres of land are needed for a typical well?
Well, this is Peter. Usually the pads here in Pennsylvania, 3 to 5 acres is needed, but then there's also the access roads that have to get built to get to the parcels, the well pads, and that could add some acreage to that as well, because a lot of times you need to build new roads to get to these well pads.
Okay, what are the supplemental developments that are being located on the brownfields? Compression stations?
This is Kurt. What we're seeing in Lycoming County is their laydown yards, such as pipe storage areas, truck storage areas for the water tankers that are carrying the water from the water providers to the actual drill sites. So we're seeing a lot of those kind of things. They are welding companies, pipe coating companies, just a large variety of support services that support the gas industry that move into an area when drilling is taking place.
And this is Peter. I know in addition, some of these gas companies are moving corporate offices, and we've seen them locating in old grocery stores and other unused commercial buildings.
Yeah, this is Neal. It's interesting. In the area I'm at, currently located is right outside the Marcellus drilling area itself, but there's a lot of the ancillary type businesses that are moving into areas that were unoccupied previously, whether it's trucking firms, or there's some companies that deal with spills and things of that nature. So even though we're not right over the Marcellus is actually economically feasible to do the drilling, there's still impacts in areas even outside that area.
Okay, great. So our next question is, what is the current energy return on energy invested for gas from the Marcellus in Pennsylvania?
This is Kurt. I think I don't have any exact numbers or anything on that, but one of the things that we are seeing is within the play there are currently 2 large power plants that are being planned and going through the stages for development in the future that would be gas-powered power plants. And that certainly we would see some numbers after they would be in operation. But just the fact that we could possibly getting 2 major power plants in central Pennsylvania will be very helpful to our production of electricity.
Okay. Have any of you encountered any novel ideas on planning for after gas extraction ends in small communities? For example, energy-based underwriting of facilities that could be used for other industries?
I don't know if I consider this. This is Neal. A lot of the businesses that I'm seeing, again, at least in my current location, I'm right outside the Marcellus drilling area, but there are a lot of businesses that are, even though they have an existing service, they have expanded to include Marcellus, so that it's an addition to, not solely a replacement of. For example, there's a business in Lewisburg that have they actually deal with like tomato pickers and agricultural operations, but they've actually started expanding their business into water-related storage, transport trucks, or other methods for dealing with the water. So while that is a big influence for them, they still have their other business to go back to, and I think you're seeing that a lot in a lot of areas.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any. I know it's early, it's in its infancy here in Pennsylvania, and I haven't really seen too many thoughts or plans for the future once this industry is leaving Pennsylvania. I don't know if you've seen any in your neck of the woods.
Well, our Chamber of Commerce and our county, we're still actively pursuing other types of companies to come into our area, because we don't want to be, as was mentioned earlier, I think by you, Peter, or by Neal, we don't want to have all our eggs in one basket and be that one town shop, or one shop town. We need to have diversity. So that is something that very much is on our mind, and we are doing what we can to try and plan for it and to try and recruit other types of companies to the area.
Okay. Well, our next question is, how long is a well active?
Well, I didn't show a picture, but once they frack the well, production then declines over time. The highest amount of gas extracted in the beginning of the process, and over time it'll decline. Because it's in its infancy in Pennsylvania, the potential then is they might go in and refrack the well. So really don't know right now how long the production per well is going to take at this point, since it's new to Pennsylvania. But it is higher in the beginning, and then over time the pores in the rock slowly close, and so you get less gas coming out of the wells.
Yeah, there's been estimates. I mean, as far as the estimates I've heard is anywhere from 35, 40 years, but they're guesses from what I understand from industry.
And Neal, I believe that's based on being able to go in, like Peter said, and refract the well a number of times. I think you can actually refract a well, I've heard, up to like 5 times.
Okay, well, prior to the state level permitting, were there risk analysis performed similar to risk analysis that one might use when zoning in hazard zones?
This is Kurt. Not that I know of. I've not heard that there was any risk analysis used.
Okay, so our next question is, what are other examples of best management practices?
Okay, this is Kurt. For example, we ask the drillers when they are working on a site, that when they're clearing the pad and preparing for the drilling equipment to come in, that they do not clear any more trees or clear any area more than what they absolutely need. We want to keep the clearing to as small of an area as possible. We want to keep the forestation as much intact as possible. And we also want their roads and things that they do, as much as possible, we like to see them follow existing agricultural roads or logging roads and things that may have been in place previously. But one of the biggest things is we don't want to see the pad site any bigger than it needs to be.
Okay, well, our next question is, how is Lycoming County handling the wastewater generated by drilling activities?
That's a good question. We actually here in Lycoming County have 2 treatment plants that are designed just to treat the wastewater from the industry, and they are treating it to a higher standard and removing the salts and things from the water.
Okay, great. So our next question is, there was an extensive discussion of the negative impacts associated with drilling. Could you please just recap the community benefits of drilling?
This is Peter. I know we've seen investment by the gas industry in communities. That's been positive. One of the other positive impacts is that some of these communities have lower unemployment than other parts of the state. In some cases, the gas companies are redoing the roads that they're impacting from their operations. Also, some of the gas companies are giving to local nonprofits in the community, groups that have a hard time able to raise money to meet their activities, and so there's some of the positives that I've read about in the newspapers and on the internet.
Right. Yes, and there was just some results that came out a week or 2 ago as far as metropolitan statistical areas in the United States. And Lycoming County was listed as number 7 in the top 10 for growth.
Yeah, another thing that, and this is just, I think being looked at now, is the potential positive impact on agriculture. There's a lot of farms that are having a very hard time of it financially, and just from the leasing or from the well production. A lot of farmers have just been able to continue or to switch to another type of operation.
Okay, our next question is it possible that the county will be legally challenged on excluding drilling in some residential zones by the gas companies or leaseholders?
This is Kurt. That's a good question. We don't anticipate that we will be, because we did work with the industry, and it's important to note in my conversation with you this afternoon, I talked about the difference between prohibiting a well pad within a certain zoning district and still permitting the extraction of the resource from that zoning district. And that's what we've done here in Lycoming County. We have prohibited the well pads in 2 of our zoning districts, but the gas can still be extracted. The pads can be set up outside in the neighboring zoning district, and they can horizontally drill underneath the 2 prohibited districts and still extract the gas.
Okay, our next question, is there a resource depletion investment fund at the state level funded from tax income on the gas sales that will build and provide for redevelopment in the future?
This is Peter. There's none exist right now in Pennsylvania that I'm aware of.
Okay, so our next question, what lessons can be learned from the April 20th fracking fluid overflow in Bradford County?
Well, I don't know what specifically they're talking about. If they're talking about the one, I guess, out in the western part of the county, that this activity does have some risk, and if it's done correctly and follows the rules and regulations, we shouldn't have many instances like this. So we need to have proper inspection and enforcement of the regulations regarding the gas drilling in order to prevent those type of accidents occurring.
Okay, well, our next question, and I think it'll be our last question for the session, so if we haven't gotten to any of your questions, you're more than welcome to contact Kurt, Neal, or Peter, and I'm sure they'd be happy to follow up with you. But our next question is, can a farm maintain its organic rating if it allows drilling underneath it, and how is that certification maintained?
Well, I'm not an ag educator. I don't know if for Neal or Kurt.
No, I'm certainly not either, but I'm sure that's something as far as through extension that can be found out for you. So, I'd suggest contacting Peter and myself, and we can find the right people that you need to talk to.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much for presenting. I think it was a really great session. I'm going to go ahead and just go through a few reminders for those of you still in attendance in just a moment. Sorry, I was muted. So first off, to log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, please go to www.planning.org/CM, select today's date, Friday, September 23rd, and then select today's webcast, Natural Gas Extraction Planning Implications. This webcast is available for 1.5 CM credits. We are also recording today's session, so you will be able to find a recording of this webcast along with a 6-slide per page PDF at www.utah-apa.org/webcast-archive. And this does conclude today's session, and I want to thank everyone again for attending.